Form Specialist Seminar. Say that 10 times fast. All right. So I'm Susi Sivkov, and I work with the National Notary Association. I don't just get up on stage to make up silly songs. I actually have been in the DNA for 13 years, and I teach notaries. I've taught notaries all across the nation, been in 19 different states teaching notaries, and most recently I actually even got to teach for Guam via webinar. So I've had a lot of fun kind of learning about the notary world all across the nation. And so today we get to talk about some other exciting opportunities that, for the most part, notaries would fit perfectly for this niche. People of integrity, people that pay attention to detail, people that want to provide service, people that care, and that's you guys. But before we get into our talk on what an immigration form specialist is, and what exactly an immigration form specialist would do, I do want to say this. Just like with notary signing agents, where in some states there are specific regulations where only attorneys can provide those specific services, there are states that have the same kind of restrictions when it comes to providing immigration form specialist services. So I just want you to know that, and if you're in one of these 4 states, I want you to know that there will be more restrictions and maybe less opportunity for you. Not to discourage you, but I just don't want you to sit through a whole workshop and then find out, oh, my state isn't an attorney-only state, if you will, right? So if you are from Oregon, Colorado, Tennessee, or North Carolina, those states do have very specific prohibitions for anyone providing immigration consulting services unless that person is an attorney. So I just want you to know that, so that if you wanted to go find a seminar that would be more suited for you, you could do that today. Okay? It looks like everybody's still hanging out, so I'm glad. All right, so what is an immigration form specialist? Well, let's take a look. An immigration form specialist is a professional trained to provide non-legal immigration services. Everybody say that with me. Non-legal immigration services. That means services that do not require the qualifications and involvement of an attorney. And we're going to define that a little bit better in just a little bit, all right? But why? Why is there a need for immigration form specialists? Well, there is a growing demand. Let's take a look at some stats here. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 40 million people currently living in the United States were born in a foreign country. 40 million. Immigration has accounted for 29% of U.S. population growth since the year 2000, according to the Pew Research Center. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants apply for naturalization status in the United States each year, hundreds of thousands. And 772,623 petitions were filed just in 2013, according to the Office of Immigration Statistics. So as you can see, there's a growing need, and those numbers are only going to increase, correct? Yes. Absolutely. All right. Here's the real kicker. Most of the immigration population is unable to afford the services of an immigration attorney. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Yes. And they need lower cost, non-legal immigration services, all right? So when possible, wouldn't it be great if we could help out those folks when they don't need legal services, they don't need legal counsel or guidance, they just need help filling in those complicated forms, Maybe they need help understanding the language and they need some translation services. Or they just need someone who's detail savvy and business savvy to be able to package those forms or find the forms that they need per their requirements, and to be able to get those forms and to be able to send them off for them. So we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. Now, there are 3 types of visitors, or categories, if you will, visa types. There are the immigrants, the non-immigrants, and then the undocumented, all right? Now, immigrant, that means they're intending to come here and stay, right? Non-immigrant, they're just here for short term, and they plan to go back to their country. and then those who are undocumented. We wouldn't be able to really help those undocumented because those are the people that would probably most need that legal advice. But there are some situations over here on this side of the board where we could be of assistance with non-legal services. And think about it. Well, there are some subcategories here, right? Under each subcategory, there are millions of people's stories, right? Millions of situations under each of those. And so that's where we might be able to come in handy sometimes. How can we help? Non-legal services may include assisting applicants in completing the forms. You're not giving them legal advice and telling them what they need to put on their form. You're basically just you're asking them the question that's on the form so that they can answer and you can provide the information on the form. Providing translations. As I mentioned before, some may not be very fluent in English and they may just need a direct translation of what's being said on the form. Securing supporting documents. There may be additional documents that they need, and you can help them find those. You can help them print those off or help them fill those in as well. And then submitting a completed form or package for them to the USCIS. And then you can also recognize when they may need legal representation, and you can help make those referrals. Okay? Here's what you can't do. You can't advise a person on how to answer the questions on the forms, all right? You can't give opinions or discuss legal strategies on how they need to go about handling their immigration business situation. Selecting forms for customers. You're not going to be the one saying, oh, this is the form you need, all right? And we're going to talk about resources that you will have to help them find what they need. Answering questions of legal nature, of course, you can't do that. You can't appear in court on the client's behalf, and when you do make those referrals, you can't do so for a fee. All right, so these are the big no-nos. All right. So how do we avoid the unauthorized practice of law? Because it's a fine line, right? And you all know that because in your notarial duties, it's the same thing, right? So when somebody comes to you with a document and they need their signature notarized on that document, do you ever help them fill in the blanks or tell them what they should put in that document, right? Do you ever say, oh, this document needs an acknowledgement or this document needs a jura? No, that's going to be on them. They have to decide which type of certificate they need, right? And if they come in and say, I think I need a will, you're not going to go online to wills.com and print one off for them and tell them this is the one they need, right? So it's very similar as far as avoiding the unauthorized practice of law. So the best way to start is by beginning the conversation with, I am not an attorney. I cannot give you legal advice on immigration or any other matters, right? And in some states, it's even required that you post that so that you can let your customer know. Lead the conversation with questions. By asking them questions, you're going to be able to make sure that you understand their situation. You're going to make sure that you're not leading the conversation with, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. So that leads us to the third way to avoid the unauthorized practice of law, which is do not give opinions. So what you can do is you can point out the sources of the information, right? And you can read instructions directly from the forms on the official websites, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. So basically what you're wanting to do is you're going to want to turn that what, how, or why question from your client into a, well, I know where you can find the answer, okay? That's what you're going to turn that question from, a what, how, or why into a where. You know what I mean? Okay, so when somebody says, well, how do I know which form I need? Well, let's get on the official resource, the USCIS.gov website, and let's take a look at the various forms, and let's read in the instructions on those forms which form you need based on your situation, okay? And then you can show the customer and then read and translate, okay? Now, we've been working with an attorney with our immigration form specialist classes, and one of the things he likes to do, even though he even is an attorney, is he likes to have a big screen set up when he's sitting with his customer. And when his customer is asking those questions, he can actually say, well, let's find this together. And he'll pull up the various forms. He'll find the instructions, and he'll point out the answers that they need. I mean, in the end, they're going to come to their own conclusion. In the end, they're going to tell you what they need, but you've helped them find where to get the information that they do need. All right? And in that way, that just gives you more credibility, because you're saying, I know where the resources are. I know where we can find this information together, right? And you're kind of leading them into a way to solve their own problem. Right? Now, there are some state regulations, okay? And according, just like with notaries, the state regulations will vary. And in some states, there are no regulations established for immigration consultants. Same as notaries, right? Some states you can just sign a piece of paper and you've got your commission. In other states you have to go through training and getting a bond, right? Some states you need a journal, some states you don't. But there are some states that do have specific requirements. So in some states there are designated titles for immigration form specialists. And it's interesting, in some states you can use the term immigrant, you have to use the term immigration consultant. In other states, you're prohibited from using the term immigration consultant because of what that could mean. So you just got to find out the designated title that might have been established for your state. And if your state doesn't designate a specific title for that role, then you could use immigration form specialist. There are in some states, licensing and bonding requirements, advertising stipulations, and fee stipulations. And so that's what we're going to move into next. We're going to talk about some of the regulations, just so you're kind of familiar. And here's the thing, when you leave this class today, then it's going to be your turn to do your homework, to go find out what you need for your state, if there are regulations established. And if there aren't regulations established, then you need to seek the best standards of care. And I'll give you a really good tip. California probably has the strictest regulations. And so, they kind of will set an example of that standard of care, right? So California, immigration form specialists are actually called immigration consultants. Georgia, they're called immigration assistance providers. Illinois, similar. Maryland, immigration consultant. Michigan, immigration clerical assistant. Minnesota, immigration assistant provider. And Nevada, document preparation service provider. Okay, so that's just an example of some of the various titles that states have actually established for immigration form specialists. When it comes to certification and bond requirements, in some states there is a surety bond requirement. In some states you must also get certified or licensed. There's an application that you must fill out and submit to the Department of State or the Secretary of State, and then also background screening requirements. Now, advertising stipulations. As you already know, being a notary, there are stipulations to make sure that you never put yourself out there as an attorney, right? As someone who can give legal advice. Of course, you're prohibited from using the terms notario publico, which actually means something like attorney in most Latin countries, right? You never can advertise as a notary while holding yourself out to be an immigration specialist. Now, what this means is, if you're not qualified and bonded as an immigration specialist, you can't put yourself out there and say that you are, right? But if you are an immigration specialist, if you've been qualified and bonded, then you can make that advertisement. Claiming to have rights, powers, or duties unauthorized by law. Okay? So again, we go back to that clause that's always good to post, whether it's required or not, that says, I am not an attorney, I can't give legal advice or any other advice on immigration or any other matters. Okay? In some states, there are also fee stipulations, okay? Charging more fees than are authorized by law, price gouging, charging more than a designated amount for entering data on forms. Let me give you an example of that. So in California, there's a fee restriction, but only for entering data. Okay? If you're a notary, and also an immigration consultant, then all you can charge for actually entering the data on the form would be $15, okay? $15 per individual per set of forms, right? But keep in mind, those fees only are restricted, those are only restricted when it comes to entering the data, Okay? The law doesn't say you can't charge for translating or for providing supporting documents or for submitting the forms to the USCIS. The law just says when it comes to entering the data, that itemized fee can be no more than $15, all right? So again, it's kind of like, let's go back to comparing that to our notary signing agents, right? In a lot of states, you are regulated to only charge however much for the notarization, right? But that doesn't prohibit you from also charging for travel, right, and for your duties as a signing agent. So the restrictions kind of are similar there, okay? And in some states, you're required to itemize your fees in a contract. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you California's required contract so that you can kind of take a look at that. Again, let me say this. In most states, there are no set fee limits for immigration form specialist services, such as translating, securing, supporting documents, submitting completed forms, and other services. The only regulation we've seen so far is the regulation in California for $15 for actually entering the data, that specific duty, okay? So how do you get started? All right, well, you first of all need to determine the services that you are going to offer to the public, right? And that's going to take some upfront research in itself, right? You've got to find out what does the public need and how can I help serve in this area. You need to create a list of the USCIS forms that you are going to handle. In just a moment, I'm going to show you a sample list of the ones that we actually cover in our full immigration form specialist class that we offer. And those are typically the most common forms that an immigration form specialist can provide services for, the ones that do not require the legal advice. Okay, so I'll hit up on those in just a moment. You're going to want to conduct your market research. I know for a lot of you the question is, how much money? How much can I charge? How much can I make? And again, just like being a notary signing agent, you've got to find out what your area and what the demand is and how much, what the competition is. And you can do that by calling offices, immigration offices in your area. You can just ask them, what are your set fees for this or that? And that way you can kind of get an idea of the fees that you could possibly charge for your services. You're going to want to create a pre-printed list of the fees for each item and then post those fees, which is sometimes in some states required as well for your services. Now, you also have to compare how much you'd be able to make in the services that you're going to provide with, okay, what are my expenses going to be, right? You've got to make sure it works for you. So consider the cost of running your business, how much it's going to cost for if there is a requirement for insurance and bond, continued education, which all of us know is very important, right? Supplies, desired profit margin, salary, and if you have an office, the office rent, okay? So as I mentioned, in some states, like California, there is a requirement that you actually have a contract for your services. The contract is required to provide terms and conditions so that the customer is protected, right? And also so that your business is protected. And the contract in California requires these items. So again, as I keep referring to California, they've set forth the most regulations for immigration form specialists. So they are kind of setting a standard. And if your state doesn't have requirements, then I would say go with that higher standard, right? Make sure you do this. The contract needs to include itemized services that you're performing and the cost of each item. And of course, California IFS, immigration consultants, that itemized fee for entering the data would only be $15, right? But then those other fees can be varied. You need to also provide a not an attorney disclosure. I'm not an attorney, I can't give legal advice on immigration or any other matters. A list of all the documents to be prepared, the purpose for hire and all actions to be taken, a provision for reporting complaints so that the customer knows where to go if they do have a concern or complaint, and also a provision for reporting the unauthorized practice of law. That protects the signer or the customer, and it also protects you, right? And the contract in California must be written in both English and in the customer's native language, right? And that, I mean, that's just a good standard of business. Providing a receipt, of course, is important as well as a professional standard. It also protects your business, and in some states, again, is required by law. And by itemizing those fees, you're letting them know exactly what you've provided them and what they're paying for. So, when it comes to finding immigration forms, finding the instructions so that we can always point that customer to where. Remember, we're turning those how, what, and why questions into where. USCIS.gov is the place to go. All right? They're always going to have the most updated forms, the most updated information, any alerts. So you'll definitely want to get on and explore USCIS.gov so that you can kind of get a grasp of the vastness of all the forms and all of the requirements. And you know, there's a lot of different forms. And the N400, I believe that the instructions, there are 20 pages of just instructions. And you always have to read those instructions first. And that's where as a notary, you're perfect for this job because you're used to paying attention to detail. And by reading those instructions, you're going to be able to know exactly how to fill in a form for a customer. All right? These are the types of forms that you would most likely be able to assist a client with. A family petition, the naturalization form, which is pretty much the most common, the N400, the green card, Freedom of Information Act request, and then the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals, the DACA, okay? In addition, like I said, to helping a signer fill in forms, you would have the opportunity to also provide translating services if you're bilingual, securing supporting documents, submitting forms, and making referrals. Remember to make sure you pay attention to what the requirements are for filing, bonding, business requirements. Okay. Understanding the right forms to have for your business to provide to customers. The do's and don'ts for notaries who are immigration consultants and when there are limitations there. And how to build a reputation as a valuable immigration form specialist. This is basically what we cover in our education course. And so this was just kind of a little bit of a snapshot of all that you would learn in that online course. But these are the things that you definitely would need to know to get started. Okay? So that's kind of an overview of opportunities for immigration form specialists. And I would be happy to answer questions that I can. Just know that I don't have all the state's requirements memorized, and we also have other people in the room that might be of assistance as well. We've got Dee Waters in the back who created our curriculum for immigration form specialists, and she's become kind of an expert as well. And then Stephen Bastian's in the back of the room, and Tom Hyman. So, yes. Oh, yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, Dee. Wow, the first question I've already failed you. How much is the course that we offer?
The course is currently $900 for 2 days of training. That's the live course. We are also in the process of building out an online course, and that price has not been set yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's consistent with the market. It's
Okay.
a bit less expensive.
So it's a 2-day course, $900, okay?
Currently, we're holding it in Chatsworth, but we will be moving it around California, depending on what the market will bear. We'll move it across the organization. You're actually thinking strategically about this, Stephen, so let me know.
I guess the short answer is yes, to be determined. So we're just recently launched the course. It's been very successful, and we'll look at markets where that course we think will have similar success. True nationwide launch is going to be the course on that program is the Social Security State. So that launch is scheduled for the fall.
So the e-learning course is coming, but for now, we have the live course offered in our headquarters in Chatsworth, California.
Hey, Susie, there are other providers of immigration form training.
Oh, absolutely.